All right, Chris, we're back.
Yeah,
So
we're
let's
back for
continue.
another one.
Yep. So you last time you were on your way home.
Yeah, so I think I talked about arriving and seeing my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I talked too much about the voyage back actually.
Yeah, let's go
Do you
on.
want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I remember you straight away started running.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, the first night.
Yeah.
And because I was actually quite a running freak actually. I realise
Mm.
that now. It's a good way though. Um, and it's something that I didn't understand that I had. Because as I said before, I came from Wiltshire, and in the 70s there wasn't a culture of going for a run. There wasn't a culture of self exercise. There just wasn't there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist. And also there's a culture of when you're 25 you're an old man, which I now see is so ridiculous. But I think also that you can tend to have a self fulfilled prophecy about your health and your future. Where at 40 you're a middle-aged man and that's it. Your life's finished and you've got maybe a couple of decades before you just say
Mm.
bye bye, which is certainly as I've got older I realise is complete nonsense. As long as you maintain your health,
I
and it is
agree.
very true, your health means everything. Now, I also found running is a very therapeutic medium. And if somebody ever said to me, "Why do you run?" Is it because you want to stay fit? I'd say no. I want to stay mentally healthy because being fit was a sort of given.
Mm.
I thought because it did actually help for my job a lot, and that's why a lot of people train themselves because as I said before, you're like a strong car, and if you let the car engine wear out, you've got problems in your job, and then things can become very painful. And embarrassing. So yeah, so because I was smoking,
Mm-hmm.
during that time,
I have a
and I
question
used to,
about
and
it. Like
yeah,
when I joined my unit, then on the first, I don't know, 2 months in or something like that, one dude told me that, hey Remo, you're cool, but you have to get 10 years older in 1 year. And the question to you is that, what do you think? Did the war actually made you more mature and older in a
no,
very in four?
no,
No.
no, no, no. Um, I might be wrong. I might be wrong. Um, I suppose I had the benefit of being 24, which I think helped. And the benefit of my, I told you about my father, which I think matured me. And
Mm.
also, even I read now. Oh, he's only 17. They're children. When I was 17, I was a man.
Mm.
And in fact, I joined up, and in that month, I was 16 and 17. You know, so and also I'm very careful not to overplay. You know, war makes you a man. Or war whatever. I think it must have matured you in some way.
Mm. But
Um,
yeah, so you were back to
so
running.
yeah,
You were
yeah.
starting to
So
do that
yeah,
healthy.
so yeah. I know I might be wrong on that because I try not to get involved in you, you could say the psychological aspects of these things because I think you can yet again give yourself a self fulfilling prophecy about oh I should be now mentally impaired. Oh now I've got so much older because I've seen war, which I think is a load of bollocks. You know,
Yeah.
just get on with life. It's what you
Mm.
joined up for. So that's my father talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you dare, don't you dare. That's your job. What else do you expect? So I could also have an argument that it actually made me feel a bit younger,
Mm.
easily. But anyway, let's get back to the running. So
Yep.
I use the running as a sort of and any form of exercise. The sort of you reboot and you refresh a computer. Well, obviously I couldn't think that way then, but now I do. So I see it as a way of rebooting and defragging your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so I've now lost a lot of weight, like every inch of or ounce of body fat. I've got back on board the ship. Oh, it was so beautiful to sit down and have a meal. Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, and then it was actually now dark. Well, it got dark quite early, so it could have still been about 4 or 5 o'clock. And I thought I'm going to go for a run. And as I said before, the ship's deck was perfect, quarter-mile running track basically. So I put on my running kit, and I did what I always do: go for a 6-mile run at the end of the day. And I actually got stopped. I actually got stopped by a sergeant major, and he must have been a HQ. He must have been a rear echelon MF, you know. He said, you shouldn't be running because it might wake people up. And I'm like, mamma mia, this is a massive concrete deck, you know. And I've got running shoes on. Unfortunately, being one troop, or unfortunately, the troop commander was actually duty officer that night. And I actually bumped into him about 20 seconds later, and I said, hey, boss, this, you know. And he went, I said, can I have your permission to go for a run? He went, yeah, of course you can, you know. I would have gone for a run anyway, but I thought I'd cover my arse just in case, and that was nonsense. So I went for a 6-mile run, and I rebooted myself. I cleaned my lungs out, and that was the first step of my rehabilitation back into now the normal world again. Yeah, and
how long was the trip back?
Well, the trip was 2 weeks. And that's like, it took obviously a lot longer to go down because we were stopping and starting and all the rest of it, you know. But now it's a 2 months sail back, and obviously we had to cross the equator, so the weather's brilliant. So we're now eating properly again. We were deathly white because we've been wearing cam cream and the weather was so bad. But yeah, we were white like ghosts, and now I've got a lovely holiday suntan, yeah, a really beautiful suntan, and I do suntan well, and really slim and fit looking, and I always remember, you know, as we lined up to get food in the galley, which is the naval term for the kitchen, one of the civilians said, they won't believe these people have been to war, because we just look so fit and happy, actually, because we were happy, you know. And they've actually said that having so many of your friends on board one ship and 2 weeks to decompress, that it actually stopped a lot of possible problems later on, you know, and also misbehaviour when you got back straight from that to civilian normality. It can then blow your mind a bit. I will accept that. So we actually normalised on the ship for 2 weeks. Yet again, one of the funny things is the first day on the ship, you know, first proper day, and I remember, you know, trying to sleep now on a proper bed, and there's 2 things that I remember. One, I found it strange. My body felt strange, and my feet hurt because my feet are now getting warm for the first time properly, you know. And certainly I had chilblains, and in fact our rifle company, I've been told that if I was to claim for a war pension, I'd get one immediately by saying I was K Company 42 Commando, because they expected and not acknowledged that everybody's got some sort of cold weather injury, you know. And I actually have now, actually. In fact, I'm twitching my foot now thinking about it. I have actually got a bit of an injury to my left foot, you know, where part of my muscle feels a bit dead, you know. So that came out later in life, and perhaps I'm dumb for not claiming my war pension. But I remember that, and I also remember being told that we've now got to have a training program. So you just finished a war, yeah. You've all lost weight. You're all been starving, and some staff officer from brigade has issued down through the chain of command that the men can't be allowed to just rest. They need to be motivated, and they need to have a training program. And this actually caused a sublime mutiny at all levels, actually. Because I turned around and Bob Boss and I said, basically, you can fuck off. And he was in agreement. But I was in NCO and he's an officer, and I was fuming. Not so much for me, but for the lads under me, So I complained.
The training was on the ship?
Yeah. Like the way we went down with training, you continually train,
Yeah.
And I accept that. But this was one time where I say, just leave us alone. We're well-trained, disciplined troops. We just need to relax in our own space and have a good laugh. And, of course, our own boss, our own hierarchy understood this. But we're now talking about the rear echelon. And I'm quite sure you've had this problem where some rear echelon senior guy sticks his nose in. And all I say is that I will never forget that. I thought the stupidity of it. And when I inquired, I said, well, it's come down from brigade headquarters. So the compromise was, we will have a training program, but it will be non-military. It will be PT, which was normal, and I wanted to do, and then it would be things like, and it was just made up nonsense that we never did. Like we'll have quizzes, It was nonsense. It was nonsense. It was just to placate some, and I'm going to say it, some shit for brain staff officer from brigade who lives in the past saying, oh, the men must be occupied, otherwise they're going to cause mischief.
Yeah, I get it. I get
and
what
I'd
you mean.
Smack him right on the nose, even to this day, you idiot. I've seen
that kind of behaviour.
You know where I'm coming from, that. And as a frontline soldier, you understand my anger still at that, the stupidity of it. And if I dragged that guy into the field with me, if I could go back in time with a time machine and say, what do you reckon now? After 3 or 4 days, no food, in the whipping rain, that as soon as you get back on board the ship, you want us to train and not rest you. Take some of this, So apart from that, everything was good. And it was good. So we had a really fun trip going back. The bars were open, but you know what? There was no outrageous, but there was nobody getting drunk and stupid stuff. We had a concert party, which was absolutely hilarious, with guys making fun of each other. We had the Royal Marine Band on board the ship.
All right.
And you know what? one of the funny things about the Royal Marines is how we've shifted so much in our history. We've always had a very fine, brilliant band, and I would say, and you can obviously make your own decision. But if you watch the Royal Marine Band on YouTube, you'll understand how good they are. I think they're the best band in the world, actually. But they're also not just a marching band. They're also very talented musicians in their own right, and they can play Elvis, they can sing Elvis, and all the rest of it. So they used to play in our bars in the evening, and I've always got the deepest respect now for our band because of the way they used to entertain us, And of course, in the war, they acted as stretcher bearers. Because that's their wartime role, stretcher bearer and other sort of things, background activity things. I don't think background activity is the correct way to explain that. But real echelon things to do. So the trip back, 2 weeks, got a great suntan, decompressed, if that's the right word to use, or they use it now, which we didn't understand. We didn't understand about those things then, and also the hierarchy certainly wouldn't entertain it. It's just job done, next day. And I know the Royal Marines were quite hard about this, which I don't think is a bad thing. But I know now they've really learned with Iraq and Afghanistan that you've got to understand that people are not quite the same as they were, and you've got to find a way to mellow them back into society. That I do understand.
Which I think that the Estonians in the beginning really didn't do.
I think. Okay, I'm gonna answer that question, actually. Although I think I can. I think I can jump ahead of myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go back.
Yeah.
I think the Estonian soldier has been magnificent. The way that so many people, and the same people, for the reasons that I will explain later, kept on continually being selected and pressured to go back to Afghanistan. So much so they were asking for volunteers for people in Afghanistan for the next tour. And a lot of people were really up for it. The problem is that whilst they may be up for it for a multitude of reasons, you should not allow it, because you may create a problem for them later on in life. And I have got a picture now of somebody, or I can actually picture, who I saw change completely from a young man actually to that old man I think you were talking about. And he was drinking a lot, and he was doing other stupid stuff, you know. And I could argue that too many tours without any empathy or understanding from the hierarchy, who just wanted boots on the ground, boots on the ground, boots on the ground, and we can only trust you for this reason, and this will reflect towards training is correct for everybody later on when I talk about the Estonian training, is that they could only select a certain amount of people that they could trust. So too many people, the same people, continually rotated onto that mission. Mm-hmm. And that can cause problems. And it normally, I've can cause problems actually, maybe in 10 years' time. Because there's one thing that I've noticed, even with myself, you can contain things in your mind very well when you're younger. As you get older, I call it boxes being locked in your mind, and later on the lock collapses, and you can't help but think about the past. And sometimes the past has got things you shouldn't really dwell on. I think I'm pretty good at that, at keeping it in a box. But I do notice there's some things I don't want to think about, I've started to think about. And I'm mature enough now just to put it to one side. But if you're younger, I think that's a real problem, or can develop into a problem. So
your guys were good.
So we had a great time on the ship going back. But we were so used to going away. And of course, there's not the internet or anything like that on the ship. We've got the radio, as I said before. We've got the British broadcasting, you know, which then was impartial to a degree. I don't trust it anymore. That kept us, you know, fairly in contact with. Well, actually, no. It just talked about the task force, and that was about it. And now the job is completed. I thought, job done. And as normal, the civilians in Britain don't care. Because, you know, and I accept that, you know, it's not their job, it's my job. So when it came to Northern Ireland, I used to say to guys, whatever you do, when you go home, don't talk about it to civilians. It will just it will upset you when they talk such rubbish to you, and you're going to probably get into a fight. So just don't talk about it. And I felt the same way about what we'd just done. I was proud of what we'd just done. It's what I joined up for. But that's what I signed up for. Why should I have to try and explain to civilians why I did it?
So these days, I would say that it seems so that the Americans, in a way, they have done a job where the civilians kind of are putting the soldiers on a higher place in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So it should be, because they went through a very bad thing after the Vietnam War. And in the Vietnam War, were soldiers coming back in uniform were being spat on.
Yeah.
And in fact, guys, when they came back, the first thing they did when they were being discharged was that they would rip their uniforms off and throw them in the trash bin. That's terrible, you know. It wasn't like that in UK, but there was a complete antipathy towards soldiers. It was like, yeah, go away, don't bother us with what you've done. We're not interested. Just keep in your box. I accept that. Perhaps I accept it because it's the culture I was brought up in, you know.
Yeah.
They don't have to like it though. And you'd also get civilians telling you what you do. Oh, you do this. They treat you this way. They shout at you, and I'm like, go away. You don't know what you're talking about. That's why I I think I mentioned before, I wouldn't tell people what I did because they'd start pontificating to you about, oh, what's it like? Oh, they must do this to you, you know? And they've got no understanding of it. Anyway.
Which we
so
don't have their perspective. We have no understanding of how they are looking at the things. We have no idea.
They've got no idea.
Yeah.
They've got no idea. And I can understand. I don't understand what their job is as whatever they do. But I don't tell them how to do their job. I don't tell them what they feel like on their daily job. How can I do that?
Yeah.
So it is a bit ridiculous that way. So I expected just to get home, you know, the ship comes in and you get off and that's it, you know, just like any other time, you know. But this time, and I did, and that's why I sent you a video, because it's sometimes hard to envision this, and it was completely different. We obviously didn't understand what had been happening in UK when we were fighting the war, and it was a very, very big thing. And this I can understand now, because if we'd lost the war, Britain would have been lost as a nation. It would have been lost. First of all,
what was going on?
Well, 3 Commander Brigade would have been captured. Massive loss of face. There was quite a excuse me. There was quite a. I think I can sum it up by this: you couldn't wave the British flag without being criticised as some sort of nationalist, which unfortunately is happening now again. So when we were coming home, the first thing that I noticed was the night before, as we approached the coastline of Britain, was that there were cars lined up on the coast, and I'm talking absolutely miles of cars flashing their lights. I thought, oh, it's a bit interesting, and that was a welcome in itself. And as we approached Southampton, which ironically was the place where I actually joined up with a career service, there were literally boats everywhere following the ship, blowing their horns and sirens. There were people waving from the ships. There were some rather charming young ladies in one ship in particular who ripped their tops off of their bikinis, you know, and waved them in the air. And of course, they got a great cheer from 2,000 guys on the ship. And it was a beautiful sunny day. It was a beautiful sunny day, and it was now like a carnival. It was now like you'd won the World Cup. It was now, wow. So you've got all these young guys on the ship, this cruise liner. You've now got a beautiful sunny day. You've now got literally an armada of ships following us in, and we knew something was going on. And this was totally unexpected. And as we pulled into the dock, it was just a massive crowd. And there was flags and there were banners and people are shouting and we're shouting back, and it was a massive amount of fun. And the Royal Marine Band were there, and they were playing their music, and it was brilliant. It was really, really awesome. It was an absolutely massive event. And I think Andy Warhol was right, actually, because he said that everybody gets his 15 minutes of fame. And I think for me, that was my first chance of my 15 minutes. And I felt, wow, you know. And after you know, it came our turn to disembark. Something I never expected. My parents were in the crowd, you know. But I should have expected it, you know. But it all goes back to the fact I thought I'd just get off the ship to an empty dockyard. We get on a bus, nobody cares, and it's back to normal life. But it wasn't normal life really, because it had changed the country. It had given it strength. It had given it power, and I could feel it. I could smell it. You know, it was something unreal. I knew that the country had changed. It felt emboldened. It felt empowered. But not in a bad way. It just felt that it's got its identity back, and it's
Have
got
momentum.
and got its momentum's a good one. It got its pride back, and that was something great for me. So then, we had a chance actually to. We had to report back at our base at 10 o'clock Monday morning. This is Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to make a decision. Do I go back to London with my parents, or do I go to Plymouth? And of course, I made the decision to go with my parents. And then I had to find a way to get back to Plymouth, and I did. I arranged with somebody to pick me up, who happened to be making the same decision. So we got back home, went for a beer.
What was that first beer like in UK now?
The funny, yeah. There was the landlord of the pub knew that I was coming back, and he wanted to decorate the pub, And I said to my father and my brother, who sort of knew me, told him, "Is that okay with the dogs?"
Yeah, I can hear them. It's fine. If
It's
they
okay,
go,
yeah. That's my crazy little dogs. Yeah, I've obviously
Yeah.
seen something from the window. So they told him that I wouldn't appreciate that, and I wouldn't actually. I don't like this sort of stuff. I understand it, but no, I don't want any pats on the back. I don't want any lovely stuff. I've done my job. I've come home. A sort of silent appreciation. I can. Okay, but I came home, went to the pub, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father a little bit drunk.
Mm.
I've never seen that before, but not drunk in a sloppy way, but happy in.
Cheery.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, of course, some people, well, a lot of people, families, they if you look on the other side of the coin, they could not. I could imagine that they would be unable to watch on the news that ship coming home, because if their son had died,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be such a. I'm just trying to imagine, trying to empathise with it. It would be such a gut wrenching thing to see that there's so much happiness for some people, and there's so much unhappiness for others. So my father, obviously, because he was a World War II bomber command guy, as I said, he was prepared that I may not come home, but I do know my brothers told me since that they were in really a psychological mess every day listening to the news, and also the knock on the door, because that's what happens, and it happens here in Estonia. You get a knock on the door, and then it's your life collapses around you. So now I'm home, and you can shed that, which I didn't appreciate at the time. I do sense as I've got older, and from what my brothers told me. And so we got back to Plymouth, and I'm in uniform, and we fold in as a company, and we just hand our Arctic warfare equipment in. Excuse me, and we got nothing to do. We don't make work for work's sake, and the reason we couldn't go on leave there and then, and this goes back to why frontline troops hate HQs and as the Americans refer to them as rear echelon MF, because the reason we didn't go on leave until the Friday was because, understandably, headquarters company had a lot of things to do that week, and the CO said that HQ is working, so you must work. Well, yeah, again, as a guy in the hills getting strafed, I didn't complain when headquarters in San Carlos were under a roof and were getting 3 square meals a day.
Mm-hmm.
but this happens in every army to more or lesser degrees. And
it happened with me before we deployed.
Exactly. And it's going to happen to everybody who's a frontline soldier. They can at times get some poor leadership from HQ because of this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave it at there. Everybody who's been in the frontline unit understands this. You just have to accept it. But you know what? So what happened? I'll tell you what happened. And this is something I would never ever do. But my friend, one of my buddies, he looked at me and he said, "Let's go downtown for a beer." And it was 10:30. And I said, "Yeah, why not?" Yeah, we did. We just went, "Oh, I'm not staying here all day. Let's go downtown for a beer," and we did. You know, so rarely, our company leadership was good. They just, you know, let us chill out. You know, so long as we fell in the morning, that was it. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite now. I met Steve off the hospital ship. No, not off the hospital ship. He flew, I think, from the Ascension Islands. So the hospital ship went to the Ascension Islands, and he was then flown to a Royal Air Force station. I can't remember which one now. And when I found out about this, I went to the Sergeant Major, and I said, "Look, can I go and meet Steve when he gets off the aeroplane?" And I'm sure there was a slight lapse in judgment from the Sergeant Major. Now because he understood how close we were, and he said to me, "Why?" Yeah, exactly. And I looked at him because I can't help it, you know. I can play poker face, but if I've not got the poker face switch on, my face will tell you exactly what I'm thinking. And you could see the look on my face was, I want to jump across this desk and headbutt you, because that was stupid, and I'm not happy. And he blinked and went, "Yeah, okay." You know, I think he was a great guy actually, but I just think he forgot. He just for a minute had his Sergeant Major little bit ramp head on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Same routine. I met Steve. Steve's an outrageous guy, yeah. So we've got a hire car, and he's been shot in both legs, and his legs literally looked like he'd been snapped by a shark. It's not like the movies with these little holes. It's a massive amount of damage. A massive amount of damage. And this is now about, it's okay to say, it'll be about 4 weeks now. It'll be 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks since he was shot. And so we said, "Okay, get in the car." He said, "No, I'm driving." And when he got off the aeroplane, he was actually he was limping, you know, or walking with a very stiff gait. He said, "No, I'm driving." And he's a great driver actually. And he then drove like a madman home, which was the other side of London. So I think it was about a 2-hour drive. And looking back on it, it was hilarious, you know, because it was. I thought, yep, Steve's back on form. So yeah, again, similar to now the welcome in Southampton. It was Ipswich, and we arrived at his house, and on the roof of his house were massive British flags, and a massive crowd, and yet again I was going back to, you know, the pub that I went to the first night, and they wanted to make it special. I said no. Well, now, and Steve felt the same way. He's like, "What's going on?" But there's a massive welcoming crowd, and we're talking, I think, 100, 200 people. Family, friends, locals. Actually, I've got to be fair, it was brilliant, you know. But because we're not used to this, we were I can only talk for myself. I was a little bit intimidated by it and felt a little bit shy of it. How do I respond to this? So I remember that Steve's a lot bigger than me, so I actually hid behind Steve as he walked in, through the crowd. I can't explain that response, but yeah, we were famous again, and I have to admit, we had a great party. It was brilliant. It was fantastic, and it was really good actually. So I suppose that all this really was integrating you back into normal society.
Mm-hmm.
I think this probably helped a great deal actually.
So when were you then introduced to the next training or next something in the military?
So we had about 6 or I think we had about 6, 8, maybe 9 weeks leave, because we'd now been working if we just put it under the terms of work, we'd been working now for 7 months solid, nothing. We'd just been working for 7 full months. So we had to have Easter leave, we had to have summer leave, and also you get some leave for being away so much. So it was between 6 and 9 months, but it was a nice long leave.
Mm-hmm.
I could spend an hour talking about that, but I won't. All I'll say is that I behaved a little bit out of character. Is that I stopped training, I stopped running, and I started to go out drinking every night. Not drunk, and not drinking to forget anything.
Mm-hmm.
I was just in complete party mode. I put on weight.
That's what victory does to
Yeah,
you, right?
yeah. I suppose. I had 3 girlfriends, which I now regret. I say that because I was treating them like sweets, and I was treating them like I wasn't treating them properly, because I wasn't treating them properly. I recognise that now. I didn't understand that they had feelings, and I really do understand this now as an older person. They had feelings. They were in different parts of the country, and I misbehaved, let's say, and the Greek gods later on in life did teach me a lesson actually, which I deserved. So if they are listening, I apologise. That's the one thing that I do regret. I did misbehave that way, and then it was over, and we're now back in 4-2, our unit. We always refer to it as 4-2. Back in 4-2, and this I think is very good. We went straight back. Now is the time. We now went back to training, and guess what? The time is now evolved that it's time to go to Norway again. And before we go to Norway, we have what's called a mountain package. So when we come back, if you haven't done it before, you'll get your mountain and Arctic warfare qualification. And if you've already done it, it's just refresher training. Mm-hmm. And yeah, again, it's to keep you at a high level of that skill. So I've got no
it's
complaints.
kind of like if you're a basketball player, guess what you will be doing after break? You're gonna go and play basketball. Because
I don't know. I'm going to say it. One of the things that I have seen more recently was that if you've been to war, it means you are so well trained, and I don't need to learn anything more. And I can sit on my arse and just talk about I've been to war, and I don't need to do that.
You forget how you got there.
Yeah, and I think you understand where I'm coming from.
No, absolutely.
That used to annoy me, very much so. Although I would say the guys who got it were the ones who had better training, and they understood it, why you've got to continually do it. And I'll mention that later on in a podcast when I come to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
That phenomenon that I noticed, which was so similar to our ethos, which I really enjoyed. So the Falklands were now yesterday, and it was yesterday. We didn't talk about it. In fact, the funny thing is, on the ship coming back, we didn't talk about it, except to make fun of some of the things, you know. You can now make fun of some extremely horrible situations, you know, like shitting yourself or getting bombed and all the rest of it, you know.
Didn't you integrate in like now you understand that, hey, okay, all of the training, like most of it works, but there are some aspects that need to be changed or reconfigured, or so did you change anything in your training?
Well, what you're talking about is lessons learned.
Yeah.
You know, I know certainly at these higher levels there was a lot of lessons learned. You know, for example, on the ships, that the response cell that dealt with fires and damage was actually built in a position where you'd probably get the missile strike first. You know, that a lot of the equipment we wore that was made of nylon cotton material. So if you got burnt, it would stick to you and cause a further problem. So that's at the highest level. I've got to admit, at my level, there was no. I'm just going to say it. There was no lesson to be learned. Because
but that things that you do work.
Because what it did for me was I didn't learn. In fact, I didn't learn anything from it because I'd been trained to a high standard. So to be quite honest, I didn't learn anything from it except to consolidate that it made me fully understand the importance of training and what I'd been taught. Now, certainly that some of the things you get taught will be modified on the battlefield, but I always say, you know, battle drills are a skeleton then with cognitive intelligent thinking to the situation on the ground, because nothing you do in training will fit exactly the solution for what's going on now. You've got to use your brains now to put training and the situation together. So no, there's nothing that. Okay, lesson learned. There's one big thing for me which I learned from that personally was that I will not go anywhere now without a bivvy bag. I will not go anywhere now without one very good warm jacket that is easy to fold away, and when wet it still offers and provides warmth to a degree. Always carry bivvy poles. Whatever you do, make sure you've got some easily collapsible bivvy poles, and that means I've always got shelter. It means with a bivvy bag I can always escape into a waterproof cocoon and get out of the wind and the rain. And to that point now, you can actually get a bivvy bag that will fit in your pocket. And I don't mean one of these plastic Chinese things. I mean a proper Gore-Tex type, fully waterproof, that will fold away, and you can put in your outer mat pocket. And I would always if I go in the field, or if the nastiness broke out and I had to get back into uniform, I would always ensure that, and even no matter where I went on patrol in light order, I've got that with me. That means I can survive without a large burden, without being resupplied, and in the worst elements for a certain period of time. So that was my personal thing. But on the battle drills and all the rest of it, it just consolidated that everything that I'd been taught was correct, and I fully understood now why we did it. I think the reason why there was no massive, oh my God, we've just learnt now something that we needed to do, was because we'd been at war continually for hundreds of years in some shape or form.
Yep.
And what was good about our corps in particular was that, okay, for example, when I passed out of training, the officer who came to pass us out, the senior officer, served in World War II. Even when I went to the first unit, there was one very old Marine who they'd retained who'd also fought in World War II. The regimental sergeant major had fought in Korea, and he was at the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir with the United States Marine Corps. My troop sergeant in training had been in Malaya and Borneo and Northern Ireland. And Aden.
Mm.
So not only were you consolidating your skills, but the people who became your leaders and also insisted on training to the high standard understood why you had to do it, because they understood that if you don't, when it comes to war, you will suffer, and it's too late. It's too late.
Yep, it's too late.
Too late. Once I had said to me here, I can't help but laugh now. I was complaining about, the training system.
Mm-hmm.
And I had said to me, yes, I know. But when we go to war, we will learn very quickly. We may lose 50%, but we'll learn quickly. And I said to him, my reply was, how about we train hard now and we don't lose 50%?
Mm-hmm.
But you see, that was just an excuse not to put your effort into getting the problem fixed now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is going to require opening up, we say, a can of worms. Nice shiny box, you open it up and you go, oh my God, this is what's inside. So if I use that as an analogy,
That's I love it.
And that's why, leaping forward, which we'll talk about in more detail, I am so enthused and happy to read in the newspaper, here in Estonia, that they are going to look. The new chief head of defence is going to look into revamping the training program for the conscript cycle, and that is so important, because if you don't get that correct, that is the foundation for everything.
Absolutely.
If you don't get that right, everything else is gonna fail.
So in terms of the lessons learned, what I got thinking when I started
Go on,
listening
yeah.
to was that so the frontline, they had such a good training, and I mean on the frontline, the feedback loop, if you make a mistake, you get it right away. If you make things right, you get it right away as well. Now if you go higher in a chain of command, the feedback loop is much longer, right? And as you are, doing the lessons learned, there must be a lot of lessons that you learned. But now another thing is that, do you implement those lessons? You have identified a lot of lessons. You haven't learned from them yet. And what is interesting to me, that in the front line, as you said, you kind of learn nothing because your training was so good. Now, the repetition.
If your training is so good.
If it is so good, and on a higher level, it's very difficult to get the repetition in, to get the feedback, what is actually right and what is actually wrong, because you can do all the wrong things, and if you have a good frontline troop, you can still win.
Yeah.
So how do you choose from a higher level point of view what to even implement? And eventually, as there are so many things to implement, I would suggest that most of the time nothing is learned.
I think you've just described the situation here. Actually, that's what you've just described.
Yeah.
Because my problem, this might sound strange, and I hope I I hope I have the verbal capability to get this across. I was caught in a conundrum with the Iraq troop that I hate using the I word because it wasn't just me. It's people, great Estonians who I trained and worked with, who were fantastic. But the Iraq troop was the gold standard of infantry for Estonia. And when they went with the Americans to Baghdad, which was one of the hardest, worst, most dangerous places on that deployment, not only did they go with the Americans, but they also became the spearhead for the unit because they were looked on as being so good. And of course, Estonia and the hierarchy were applauded. How good you are! And the hierarchy, preening like a peacock, said, yes, our army is so good. To which my reply was, no, that platoon is not the army. My only concern was that there were two things. I wanted to wake up the hierarchy to understand that you can have this for everybody. This is not unique. This is for everybody. And if only you can understand all the lessons that the guys, new lessons that the new guys were taught on the Iraq troop, that made them that capable, are available to everybody if you open up the system for me to assist you with, and stop shutting the door on me because of egos.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, in some ways, shut the door on myself, because the better that troop was, they would then say, well, we don't need your advice. We don't need to change anything because our soldiers are so good. And I can only say this was a Soviet mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now the Chod actually was one of the troop commanders that I was involved with, and he had a great troop. We had a great time. So he has now got a different vision platform and understands the situation. So there was a definite disconnect with boots on the ground here in Estonia and the hierarchy, who were completely devoid of the actual situation. I personally think that they knew, but chose to play I see no evil, I hear no evil, I speak no evil. Because it would open up that can of worms. And it would also open up the questions to be asked. Why didn't the last chief head of defence make a difference? Why didn't he make this change? So I felt that the hierarchy had been caught up in a cycle of shit, for want of a better description, and that's how I describe it now. It was a cycle of shit, which I reinforced. My dilemma is that if I walk away, people will die.
You have now no influence if you walk away.
Well, there's that as well. But I wasn't doing it for personal influence.
Sure.
I'm not interested in myself.
Influencing the organization and the
well,
troops.
And I have to admit, I have influenced.
Absolutely.
I have. And as it turns out, it was the longest game. Not the long game. It was the longest game.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps it was just as well that I was caught up in this. I was caught up in this, and I refused to say no and walk away. And I have to admit, I always believed that one day the dam would break. You know. Yeah.
I think it's in a way how we are able to observe things and how our brains work in terms of, if you look at the higher, and if the organization is successful, they are looking at the one man and it seems so that it will be a success of that one man. Now, and that's the perception. If you're now on a front line, you understand specifically that it's a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
But now, from a outside perspective, you are only seeing one person. You're not able to see the staff, all the lines, all the people there. So it's something which is kind of, it's a tendency to see that it's only one man behind it. But in reality, if you're facing it, you understand the only way how to win is with the team.
Always team.
Yeah.
Always team. And that's why if you look at the individual training, if you look at there's different. I try not to get too much into this, but one of the leadership models is identity leadership. I think that's what they call it. And when I looked at these so-called values, I realised this is the characteristics that I had to adopt to achieve my mission statement, which I gave myself a mission statement. When I came out here, I gave myself a personal mission statement, which was to improve the quality of training for the conscript soldier. Because I knew from that everything else has to improve, because the NCOs who train the conscripts will therefore have to be at a certain level. When the squads can work properly, the troop commander now has to do proper troop battle drills, etc., etc., etc.
Yes.
So one enforces the other to happen. You can't do it. You can't do it one piece at a time. You can then influence it and ensure, and you can also measure things. You can measure things. You can explain this is why they need to learn and do this, and they needed to be tested to this standard, which we can go on at later stage.
Yeah.
So going back to some of those values, because you mentioned team and vision. So let's see if I can remember. Yeah, so the first thing is you've got to have a vision. Well, I had a vision, which is based on my previous life. I've got a complete vision of good training. You've got to have a plan. And my plan was that if I do this well, people would say, "Oh, I want that as well." What's the other one? G. Okay, you've got to take risks. Got to take risks. And in the early stages, you've got to make some small wins. You've got to win something. So I didn't come back here just to train one troop, but I saw that if I can win, if I use the term win, if I can show you as a model, that it would then be taken on. And I do know in Estonia and the Baltics, what I've seen before is if you can talk about it forever, but if you show someone, then they go, I understand.
Absolutely.
The problem is your hierarchy, our hierarchy actually, refused to come and watch and get feedback. They absolutely refused to. And you will notice this in my articles. And it's something that completely baffled the Americans, because I used to get visited often by the Americans. They loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very supportive. And the colonel in what they called the Yellow House, the headquarters of their mission in Tallinn, he would come and visit me and say, "Oh, who's come to see you?" And I'd say, "Nobody." But I think it goes back to see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Because they know that if they came, not only would I have explained things that are wrong, but also would the men, who now under my tutelage had also become quite outspoken and unafraid to speak the truth.
Truth is very powerful, yes.
I think they were frightened by that.
Absolutely. Because the truth is too hard to...
Well, when it's the truth, you can't deny it. When you can prove it's the truth, it's in your face and they can't deny it. Because it's like, I've been caught in the bank with the money that I've taken. Oops, I can't deny it. So what made me think about this was because you mentioned other people. Although it started around me, it was a team. It was a team effort,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to build a team. And that was very hard. And I'll explain that at a later date. And of course, it takes a lot of time. You know. So
So
yeah,
I think
very,
we have established that it is very difficult to learn when you have a huge ego, and that's what actually, if the commanding troops on a higher level are seen, they will get the praise for
yeah,
something what
yeah,
they were not specifically responsible, and now they start believing it, which means that now their ego gets pumped up,
yes, yeah, yeah,
which now closes their mind,
yes,
and there's no feedback going in there because I have won. And
yeah,
that's what the psychology of the book Psychology of Military Incompetence is all
yeah.
about.
And that's exactly what was happening. So the better I made them, the more they didn't have to listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
I can laugh about it now.
That's the dichotomy of it.
You know, yeah. So I was really no. It is a bit silly, but yeah. I don't want to say anything more about this because there's so much to say in a sort of logical sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And this subject can get me down so many rabbit holes,
Yeah, I can
which I think will be best. You know, the rabbit holes being maybe
Mm-hmm.
following those maggots as they fall out of the tin. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why somebody once mentioned to me about this problem, that it's a wicked problem. And do you know what the definition of a wicked problem?
I don't think so.
I didn't know this until he told me. And it was a wicked problem is a problem that when you fix the problem, it identifies another problem. So when you fix that next problem, you find that it's presented you with another problem, and so on and so on and so on. Because once you investigate this, to fix this, you've got to fix this, then you've got to fix this. And it's I understand. So I always try and put myself in the other person's shoes or boots. So I do understand as people go up the chain of command and there's this massive, massive problem to solve, it can be easier to play the see no evil game. But I think this goes down to then qualities of a leader, you know, moral courage, willpower, and all the rest of it. It is too easy to turn a blind eye, especially when everybody's being used to being patted on the back, and it then becomes, well, in fact, it's somebody else's problem which they seem to have solved. So all good, I'm great. But so I fully understand, or I can empathise, why the chain of command wants to pretend all is good, because another thing that I noticed later on when I going down the line many years was that inside, deep in the soul, they know.
Mm-hmm.
And when good old me in British uniform, which was the first example, explained the situation, which was ironic for me, a Brit who'd actually only been here a year, was explaining to them what was wrong, I could see on their faces, how does he know that? And you know what? He's right.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing then was they admitted it. Let's leave it there on that, because I'm going to deviate completely and jump ahead many years.
Mm-hmm. So let's turn back the clock to Norway and the second part of your career.
Okay, yeah. So now we've got back to UK. We've been on leave, and we just get back into daily training.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the same old.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we've now got some fresh faces.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fresh faces. What normally happens after a major deployment like that is that we get a lot of people get, okay, we call it drafted. A lot of people get drafted out. A lot of people get drafted in, which I think is healthy. It's like a sort of blood transfusion for the unit. Whilst it still retains a hefty part of its leadership, you know, it still retains a good skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
And also it means that experience from before can also be then transmitted to the new guys. So
Yeah.
it's this very good revolving cycle of information gained, experiences gained, then passed on to newer people. But it was the point I wish to make is that the Falklands War was yesterday, and it was just put to bed completely, and we just got on with everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was it. It was now as if it had never happened. I think that's a very healthy thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can fall into the trap of, oh yeah, we are so good. But it actually goes back to what we talked about, actually. We are so good, we don't need to do anything now.
It's like the same, like you think about the people who win Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
You just won it.
Yeah.
Now you go back to swimming.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's what Michael Phelps did.
If you wish to
Continue.
if you want to
On the same
continue
level.
competing, you've got to go back and maybe even train harder. Especially as you
And
get older.
And I would assume, I don't assume, it now gets more complicated because you kind of have done it.
Right, that's a very good question. That's a very good question, that. Or very good observation. Without a doubt, because I do remember somebody telling me this. He said, I'm going to leave because I've done it. Because going back to training after you've done it can be a complete downhill.
Mm-hmm.
And I use another example. Guys, one of my friends came back and he had to go on his junior command course, which is the course I mentioned before, which was very demanding.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got the instructors there who've not been on this war.
Yeah.
And they are now telling them, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I do know it'd be very easy to allow yourself to say, what is he doing telling me? He didn't go to war. But that's a big mistake to make.
Absolutely.
Big mistake to make. And we don't make it in our professional corps because we don't see going to war as being the consolidation of training, excuse me, training or skills. Mm-hmm. It's just, guess what? That's what you're paid to do. That's what you're trained to do. Shut up, get on with it. If you think you're so good because of what you did 3 months ago, this course is going to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
So there was no, and the way we've been brought up in this mature way, it didn't have any bad feeling where, although of course I'd say if I'd done my course after rather than before, certainly there's some things which I would understand that whilst we are being so, okay, we say straight down the line, no black and white. In war, there's a lot of grey areas, But I do understand that in training and when it comes to standards, there's no grey areas. This is what we want. This is what you're going to do. And if you can't do it, you're going to fail or pass. That's it. So I can understand that and I get it. So I've been brought up in a mature, logical, hard training fashion. So I understood this. And also attitude is also part of the skill of a leader. You've got to have a good attitude. So if you'd started playing the I've been in war, I don't need to learn game, you would be on your toes, you'd be off that course and you would never get promoted. Because that's a wrong attitude. Because you see, if you become a corporal and sergeant and you haven't been to a theatre and somebody then says to you, I've been to Iraq, you can't tell me what to do, you'd be like,
It's like
You're
you never
finished.
learned anything.
Exactly, And unfortunately, in some armies, that's the case. It's ridiculous. So yeah, it did cause a few guys to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were going to leave anyway, or maybe they joined up for this, and they realised that I've now satisfied
The itch.
that itch. Yes, that itch.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to admit, from saying that now, it's brought out because I've not really thought about these things for so long, and maybe I never thought about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been in the mind somewhere. That okay? So lessons learned. I'd say the lesson learned for me was, yes, our training is absolutely necessary, And I fully understand many things that we go through. I really understand that now, about why they always made us wet and cold, why they gave us so little sleep and all the rest of it, all these basic things which you think maybe are a little bit cruel. They're not. The other thing is that you now know that you can do it under fire. That's and you obviously you can't learn that except under fire, you know. Because some guys who've been well trained and appear to be good leaders, when it's real ammunition and you could die, they absolutely collapse. That has happened. That does happen. I only know of one case that happened to, and that was a Marine, not in our company, another company. And I also know that in the British Army, in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was an occasional cases where people would be relieved to command because they collapsed under this real emotion of life and death. But the harder you train, the less chance that will happen. So that's the big thing, and the less chance, because if you have to find out on the battlefield, you will have these emotional casualties in a far larger amount. Yeah, so
it's kind of like interesting because it happens in not only in those kind of circumstances but also in sports. Like I remember in training, I was really good at playing soccer.
Mm-hmm.
I was really good. Now when we get to the spotlight of playing the game, and you are now kind of under the fire, you kind of are expecting to be as good as you were in training, but now you kind of overthink it. So you have to somehow let it go, but it kind of happens in weird random ways, which is hard to explain for me. Like, when is that actual thing when, okay, now I understand, now I can let go, and now you can perform regardless, is it training or that other thing? But some people just can't get that over the bump.
The only way I can try to explain that is that, and I know you'll understand this because of your background, is that whilst we can't shoot at you with real ammunition in training, I mean back, because training can be very, very realistic and demanding, is that there are other ways of building the frictions and the pressures, because frictions and pressures, whether it's at war or even for me going shopping now, if there's an unusual pressure put upon me, that is a pressure. It's not mathematics. It's just that it's a different scenario, if that's the way to try and encapsulate this. So in training, there are other pressures put upon you to make up for the fact we can't actually shoot at you and may kill you today.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself is a skill that you can't actually write down on the training program, except it's built into the program by experience, and because you've learnt to do battle exercises and you write battle exercises and you do exercises that put you under extreme pressure.
It's a byproduct.
For example, they would always make sure that we had little sleep. We were always doing something. It was just to get food and sleep when you're on exercise is just fitting it in somewhere. You'd get no time to prepare orders and plan your mission, but you still had to do it to a high standard.
Mm-hmm.
And also on your command courses, they give you in some ways an unrealistic time and pressure to force you to go at maximum pace, and they still expect an exemplary performance.
I have always found myself that I'm able to perform better when I'm tired and not able to overthink.
I understand. Yes, yeah. I mentioned this about the podcast. I wasn't sure if this would be successful. I don't know if this is successful. I refuse to ever, count my chickens before they're hatched. Just try and do the best you can at that time. That's the pressure I put myself under. Don't try and outthink it. Just try and do your best, even if it's bad.
Yeah.
So what? So be it.
Yeah.
I tried to do my best at that time. Perhaps I tried to overthink this podcast this way because I like being sat in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
a real face-to-face human contact,
Mm-hmm.
because it puts me under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to give a lesson, for example, to 100 people or 10 people, it's irrelevant. But getting in front of people, it's a bit of stage fright. Even for me now,
Yeah.
there's a bit of stage fright.
Mm-hmm.
If I practice, it is never as good, I'd like to think anyway, as my performance in front of people. Because when I go out, I find that after I understand that I've not lost it, I'm got my flow, I can relax, and because of the contact with people, it puts me under a pressure even more so to invigorate me to do well, because I want them to learn. I want to teach them. And I get satisfaction from that. If I know I've given a bad lesson, I'll walk away afterwards and I'll beat myself up so much. I'll even do it after a good lesson. I'll be thinking, I could have added that, could have done this, maybe next time, because you're never perfect. You can't be perfect,
No.
But if you do well and you think, I can still improve it, I think there's always a way to improve it.
There's always a way.
So I did think that maybe I may lose that little bit of pressure. So far,
No,
I think
it could be a different type of pressure.
it could be actually,
And
yeah. Could be actually,
yeah.
yeah. It could be. That's a good thing.
So
I
now-
do actually like being. That's the irony. I don't like being under pressure, but when I'm put in pressure, I tend to react well to it. I can say that now. I know I do.
I agree.
But that you see is the people you need to do these jobs. In fact, any job, even if you're a manager of a shop, when things are going badly, you've got to actually calm down, analyse, find a solution, and correct it and continue.
We say it, you have to detach, relax, look
Yeah.
around, and make a call.
Yeah. And so the funny thing is, I do know, because I do analyse. I have I can see me in like a video camera, and I analyse myself, and I think, and I can also see myself during this time. And if anything, I found that the worse the situation, the calmer I become. I just relax, and because I know that, okay, we say getting your knickers in a twist, getting your underwear twisted, it's not going to improve anything. But I think this is also built on training, because you learn, you have to learn this, and it comes through that, yet again, pressure. Because if you don't calm down, find a solution calmly, you're going to make that your mind goes blank. And I actually would explain to the guys this. I said, your mind does this, and I've seen it as well, training people. And I'm thinking, God, he's doing all this and he's running up and down and he's shouting things. He doesn't know what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, when you put people under pressure, you can their demon will come out, or their goodness will come out. And whilst I don't believe you can give a formula or train anybody to become a leader, I believe that if a guy has a leadership quality, that if the demon comes out, you can explain to him that demon and how to stop it. I think that's what I'd say.
Awareness.
So somewhere somebody has helped me or trained me to calm, slow, think, solution. That's it. So and also when I've been seeing good company commanders and other people, and I've got one now I can think of. He was great under pressure. He would just speak normally, speak calmly, speak rationally. Other people around him would be in a little bit of a stew. And right, okay, this is what we're going to do. I
And
love
this
that.
spreads
I love that.
as well.
Exactly.
It calms down everyone.
It also goes the other way round. If
Yeah,
you see
absolutely.
him panicking,
Yeah,
it
everyone will be in
reinforces
panic.
your panic. And then what you've got is we call it the headless chicken scenario, where everybody's running around, oh my God, what are we going to do, you know? So calmness in a leader, that doesn't mean to say, though, that as a leader, there's times for, right, this is what you're going to do. Come over here. Do this,
absolutely.
do that. Quick kick up the arse, maybe. You know?
Yep.
So there's times, I don't mean to say that, you're going to be somebody stood there like a calm vicar giving a sermon. But there's a calmness to what you've done, even if you now have to be strong and aggressive in your approach to put the message over. When people are in a panic, because you know what? And sometimes they need that. They need it. They just need to be told exactly what to do. Right, This is what we're going to do. You do this, you do that, you back. You know? So there's, as I say, there's certain instruments to play in this, but certainly the leader has to be calm in his mind. And the funny thing is, I know that sometimes when I have to express my displeasure, I'm not actually angry. I'm not angry. Inside is my normal self. In my brain, I know I'm calm and relaxed. But I know that this time I do raise my voice to make sure that a point is put across, and the tone of my voice does express my displeasure at what you've just done. And and you can see their eyes go down. They think, yeah, I did, didn't I? Yeah, don't do it again. You know? I mean, it's you understand. I know you understand.
I get it. I totally get it, and that's what we say as well. All
But
the
somebody
time to the leaders.
who just screams and shouts, that puts me right. No, just screams and shouts, and it's like, there's no information there. There's no reason there. It's that he's panicking, he's shouting. Now that's the difference. And
now you need someone else to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And calm down, and then help you detach and get on with what you need to do.
So that's a bad leader when you've got just a screamer and shouter, you know. And of course he can scream and shout, and you've got to respond. If he says go back there, go do this, and you know it's wrong, you've got to do it, because unfortunately. No, it's not unfortunately. That has to be the way within the military system. You know, you can't argue. Although there are times to argue, actually. But that's in a mature leadership, you see. That's when if the subordinate knows what he's doing, he can also argue up. And we are taught to, and we are allowed to argue up. But you better make sure that you're right. That's our sort of simple rule on this, because otherwise you've got mayhem. Because I can be expressing myself quite clearly, and they just argue with you. Well, that's not how it works. So there is a balance here. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. So, if you now think about moving on in terms of what you did in UK now, what was the next major thing for you?
Okay, so it was Norway again. Perhaps we can talk more about that, because I don't think we talked about it much last time.
Sure.
Norway is a tremendous learning platform, because the weather will kill you.
I think we went over it in ways where you went there for 6 straight rotations, right? And now you're kind of starting the similar path again in terms of what you did in Norway, right? Yep.
Yeah. If I'm repeating myself, just cut me dead and we just crack on to something else. But excuse me. We'll keep it simple on this one. Norway, because the weather's so extreme, it will prove very quickly if you are trained and you are capable. Because if you are not, the lesson learned is you will die.
Yep. Very similar to war, right?
Yes. So it is. And many times I've been in a situation in Norway where if we didn't get out of this, we are going to die. And I have to admit, at the time, I just took it as normal. Looking back on this, I now realise, Jesus, no, we came close to dying that day. It's okay if you get away with it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
for the hierarchy as well. But it actually proves our training was good. So if you've got any faults in the system, you're going to find it very quickly in extreme environments.
Yeah.
That's my big takeaway from Norway, and why I think it was so good for 3 Commander Brigade, because there's no hiding. There's no hiding of any weaknesses at every level in that environment, because we're up in the mountains, real alpine stuff, up in the mountains, digging holes in the snow, stretching a tarp over it and crawling into it and just lying under a tarp in -20, -30. You've got to be able to ski because you're in deep snow. You've got to be strong and fit. And you've got to be completely mentally attuned to the environment and never switch off, because as soon as you do, injury time. So I think that's really Norway in itself and why it was so good. And that was another Norway, but because it's Norway and it's survival again, including all the military drills and skills you have to do. It is not like, oh, I'm doing the same thing as last year. No, I'm surviving, I'm doing, but I'm also training the new guys in my section. You know? And because I was a ski instructor, in that first 3 weeks, I would also teach the new guys how to ski and how to live in the field in Norway. That was always quite fun, you know. And apparently only there's some figure behind this. I can't remember exactly what I read once, but apparently only 70 or 80% of people, if they learn to ski, will ski. The rest, 20% failure. We never had any failures. Everybody learnt to ski, and not only that, you're learning to ski and also carry, you know, maybe 60 pounds, 80 pounds of equipment. So you had to learn to ski and then carry weight. And some guy in the section would also have to pull a polk. Do you know what a polk is? It's a sledge. It's a sledge.
Sledge, yeah.
Yeah, sledge with, it could be the GPMG with the tripod legs and ammunition. Yeah, so it was it consolidated all the skills and physical fitness. You know, physical fitness again, physical fitness, which keeps you really on a good level to survive. And that's why when I saw, there was an army brigade that came out, but they always stuck to the roads. They only stayed on the roads, and they never learnt to ski. They just learned to walk on their skis, which is the big difference, you know. But we had very little to do with that. So I think Norway was brilliant for the brigade to keep us in tip-top condition.
It's a great environment.
So we came back from Norway, and now that's a full year since the Falklands, Norway. And we had a deployment coming up to go to Canada. And Canada, it was actually okay. It was a place. The resident battalion was the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and I always remember that because a Canadian had written in the toilets. Now it's PPCLI, yeah, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and somebody had written underneath it, "Ping Pong Champions of Long Island," which made me laugh, you know. But this now, Canada is a massive area. You can drive for 3 hours to go to a shop. I can't remember the name of this place now. It might come to me. But anyway, it was in the middle of nowhere, and the training area was fantastic. It was just for literally tens, maybe hundreds of miles of training area. Now, of course, this would have been booked before the Falklands War. And we actually felt, in fact, we got told that this was going to be a little bit of a holiday for us. Because of all the things we'd done, you know?
Yeah.
So they were now going to lower the tempo and find a way to give us, you know, a holiday, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But there was one big problem. We had a new commanding officer.
Who wanted to prove everything.
Yeah. Yeah. You read it completely. He came, and he didn't go to the Falklands. He wasn't our CO, and he wanted to prove to the Canadians how tough we were and how hard we worked. He was successful in that. In fact, I remember a Canadian saying to me, "Why do you guys work so hard? Take some time off, buddy." Because we now were up at 6 o'clock every day doing PT. We went straight to the ranges, and we did all our battle drills and live firing, and it was great, yeah. And then we would speed march back from the range. No, I don't mind that. It's good training.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a great believer in work hard, play hard. And we got no play hard. And so much so that at the end of that training for 2 months, normally you get allowed a week's holiday in that country. And there's actually a system where they ask families in Canada, would you like to take a British soldier or Marine into your home for a week or 2 weeks? And they love it. And it's been like a tradition, you know. Yeah. And the CO stopped it. He stopped it. And I think he stopped it because he's now got a phenomenal record with the Canadians because of what we did. And we had some competitions against them, which we won. And if a guy, let's face it, guys are guys. Somebody at some stage out of 700 young, fit guys are going to know, drink too much, maybe punch someone, or or the like.
Yeah,
it happens, And he stopped it because if that happens, the British Embassy gets involved, and then maybe a letter may go between the CO and the rest of it about he was arrested by the police. I believe that was the situation. Mm-hmm. He wasn't looking out for the men because you know what? As a leader, you've got to maybe accept a bit of pain.
Absolutely.
He didn't. I thought he was a very selfish leader. I thought he was doing it. Everything he did was for himself, his self-aggrandizement. Because you know what? We never saw him. So he ensured that all the training was done to such a high pitch, and he was enjoying himself because he brought his wife and children to Canada. And this guy was also a big cricketer, and he was off in Edmonton playing cricket, for example. Now, of course, we all knew this, so you've now got a leadership that says, do that. And there's no leadership by example, because you know what? If we'd seen him in the morning come out and visit us, if we'd seen him join a speed march, if we'd seen him and knew that every day he was also working hard, all right, okay. But the insult to injury was he was having a good holiday with his family while ensuring that the companies were training to a high standard. So he got the acknowledgement of what a great unit you have. So you know what? When I make critiques about other scenarios and other places, it's not just that place. It happens everywhere to different degrees.
Yeah.
And I thought he was a very bad leader, very bad CO, And when he left the unit and he gave a speech, there was stony silence. You could have heard a pin drop. So that's 600-700 men, close knit together, and that was our way of showing our disapproval.
So he didn't build any leadership capital. You
He was
build
terrible.
leadership capital only when you do hard things together.
Yeah,
And the word is together.
yeah, together. Okay, if you choose not to give us a holiday, so be it.
Yeah.
But when you choose to have a holiday and you were not freezing your ass off last year, that's unacceptable. So
I'm glad that he didn't lead you to Falklands. It
Well,
would have been a disaster.
absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. It'd have been a terrible NCO, terrible CO. I believe it'd have got a lot of men killed. Yeah, we were very lucky. Because we had a great CO, but that one we tended to get good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and
That's how it is.
my only analysis of this is that whilst we remain a little bit critical of the rear echelon, it is very important. Very important. Without logistics, without all these other components, the rifle company, it'll have one battle and then that's it. Nothing more. Now, even in our fine corps, bearing in mind, to be every lieutenant out of training has to be a troop commander. He has to be a troop commander. To become a major, he has to be a company commander. You have to be a company commander. Now, there are instances. Now I'm going back to how it used to be, because the rank structure has changed a little bit. But to be a company, to go beyond company, to go to a higher rank, you had to be a company commander. Now, in between these jobs, quite rightly so, there are staff jobs. Absolutely. Now, going back a bit to this lieutenant, the lieutenant, when he's finished his commando unit troop, normally, I noticed this later on in my career when I became a professional trainer, they go back to Lympstone to join a training team. So they now get the vision of training, the real training from the basics. And I understand now how important that is. I didn't recognise that then. I recognise it now. They then will probably get a staff job somewhere. It's part of the flow and ebb of their career, and it has to be because we need this. But they will then cut if they now are going to stay in the Corps and they've been selected to stay in, because everything is about you have to continually prove yourself on your promotion reports, no matter what rank you are. And if you are not identified to be that good or to go further, you'll stay in this. You will stay a lieutenant or maximum captain, and that's forever. But if you have been identified, which is the majority, you will be a company commander, and then you're going to go and get a staff job. Now, sometimes these officers or characters are so good at their staff jobs, they are kept because they are so good at these jobs. We refer to them as desk officers. Has to happen. Has to happen.
Yep. You have to have them.
Now, if the major has missed his chance to be a company commander and he's been identified for promotion, for further promotion, he has to go back and be a company commander. So we would then get a major in charge of the company rather than a captain. Now, there was one company in 4-2, M Company, that always had the major. Now, in my naivety then, I thought, oh, they must have the best company commander. But I always noticed, and this is my appreciation, that I always thought they had the weakest. Not always, but sometimes I saw some company commanders that were not quite as good as what I would expect. because they'd been sat behind a desk too long. That's not their fault, because guess what? They may have found their niche. But we're Royal Marine Commandos. You've still got to be a fighting officer. So they've got to be a company commander. To become a unit commanding officer, you've got to have gone through those stages. To be a brigade commander, you've got to have been the commanding officer of a battalion, and so on and so forth. Now, people in between this, if they've not become the CO, because there's not enough slots to become a CO, so only the finest become COs, which means the finest become brigadiers, etc. They get stuck more or less behind a desk. I believe that commanding officer was somebody who was a very good staff officer who had been shoved back into the company commander slot, who then got shoved into the CO slot because he had to become a CO for further promotion. Because I'm sure that it's something he was outstanding. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Unfortunately, all that time behind a desk had produced some bad leadership qualities, I believe. Because I think when you're behind a desk for too long, you can lose empathy with the men.
Because it becomes too much a number on a paper.
It's just, that's not that important. What's important is all my organisational abilities. That can happen to any army, to any officer corps, to more or lesser degree. And that's why I would say to anybody, any army, if you've got an army that spends most of its life sat behind it, or its leadership spends most of its time sat behind a desk, you need to look into a mirror.
Well, it's even worse if the frontline troops are preparing for their range papers and doing it the bureaucracy instead of training.
Yes, you know about this. Yes. That's why I sort of slip that in there, and we need to talk about this at a later time because it's actually so much to talk about, and I think it's necessary if we document my experiences and your experiences together.
Yeah.
And also, you see, you can fault check what I say.
Yeah.
Because I may have misunderstood. I'm not omnipotent, but I've spent my life here having to be right or correct. Because if I get it wrong, I know I'm going to get eaten alive. I think you understand that.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah. So it really kept me on my toes. And I actually learned so much here. Anyway, I digress. So I believe this is why it's created a situation where you get good CO, bad CO. And I believe the hierarchy know that maybe this CO isn't the best, but he's got to do that job. But the unit does suffer. I'm quite sure, though, that if it becomes a real-time scenario, he would be changed. I'd like to think so, anyway.
Would you say like Jocko Willink, the SEAL, he has this saying or the quote, there are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Because at every level. Because you see, the leader, it's his job to sort out the problem below him. It's his job. Now, part of that job may be to get rid of someone.
Yeah.
But it is your job to ensure that everybody below you is able to do their job, and then you can then look the next leadership level up with a clear conscience and a confident conscience, because part of winning is being confident. Trained, all good, and that's why, going back to before, we were so confident. I don't care how many Argentinians there are, we're going to kick their ass because we are so confident, because we knew at every level we're good to go. It's off safety catch, it's rock and roll, we're going to win. Which actually, in retrospect, we should have got beaten, and we were expected to be beaten. But what saved the day was superb training and superb leadership at every level, although if you read, there's lots of books about this now. The Britain did learn a lot from it.
So Canada is over. The vacation is over. Now you're back in Britain again.
So we're in Canada. Okay, so I talked about trying to talk about there about the CO and what that brought out from Canada. it's very disappointing actually that this happened to us.
Mm.
It wasn't fair on the guys.
I
But
would say
you know what?
it sounds like a very not the motivation is wrong word. It's like very demotivating to go through that kind of thing just after what you just
Yeah, it's
like,
not fair.
Yeah.
But what you brought out is a very good point, which I can now respond to.
Mm-hmm.
It the American term, it sucked. But so what? I and others would not allow it to destroy our morale.
Yeah.
We just suck it up and get on with life.
Yeah.
We will make the best of this situation. I don't like it. I think he's a bad CEO. So what? That's just that's the cards we've been dealt. But we've got a great company commander and all the rest of it. So all good. Let's just keep away from this person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the next CEO we got was brilliant. So it's just swings. We say swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of leadership thing to talk about, which is not unique to any army. It's everywhere.
It's not even unique to army. It's about it.
Yeah.
It's not unique universally.
Mm-hmm. Everywhere. Yeah. Could be a shop, could be a sports store, could be a gymnasium. But I would say this though. In wartime, you find out when you all start dying too much.
Mm-hmm.
In those other situations you talk about, the firm or establishment goes bankrupt.
Yeah.
And that is the final lessons learned when you crash and burn.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think, the civilian, if we say the civilian world, will find out very quickly by losing money, but also that their job doesn't also involve that your workforce may die today. Mm-hmm. So there's a swing. So I think we can learn from them, yes, and they can learn from us. And if you can put those two together, that's the best. That's the best situation. Mm-hmm. And that's why if you've got a good military leader, I think he makes a good civilian leader.
And if you have a good civilian leader, it makes a great military leader, I think, as well.
Yeah. They can bring things to the table. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that you should listen to everybody. There's no harm in listening to people.
There's no use of being closed-minded.
No, closed-minded.
Doesn't really support anything.
If I ever meet anybody who's got a closed mind, I know that it's pointless. It's just pointless.
Absolutely, I agree.
It's like talking to a drunk.
Yeah.
My father said, never try and explain to a drunk. He also said, never tell someone something when you're drunk or had a drink, which you wouldn't tell them if you were sober. And I've got a funny little story there actually. I got asked once by my boss what I thought of him, and it was at his leaving party, you could say. It was very formal. We were sat around a big table making speeches and all the rest of it. But he sat next to me and he said to me, "What do you think of me?" To which I replied, "You are an arrogant, ignorant bastard." That's the exact words. Mm-hmm. And I then explained why. Because if you make a critique, back it up with something. I backed it up. This is why I think that. And to his credit, he just shook his head, nodded. Okay. Now, next morning, the last thing he did was sign our final report, because he had to. If they leave, they've got to sign our report about our whatever. It's to do with promotion and stuff,
Yep.
And he so I saw him. So I went to see him next morning, and he said to me, "Have you got anything to change from what you said to me last night?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "No, sir." And he gave me a good report.
He
Now,
respected that, I think.
he did respect it. He did respect it because you know what? Later on in life, he became the CO of the Baltic Battalion. And we got on like a house on fire. Because he knew that he needed to know the truth. No dressing it up. Just tell me what's going on. Because he actually joined after the first CO left abruptly. And as we go into this, it was a completely completely unique situation. And I'm quite sure he was thinking, what the hell is going on? So when he saw me at our evening meal, that was quite funny at the meal, these meals, he said to me, can you tell me what's going on? Excuse me, going back to that cough I've had for a long time. So he felt very comfortable that he would be told absolutely what was going on. And he's, I suppose, in some ways, indirectly linked to why I'm sat here talking to you. Because when the team downsized and one person had to go to each country, he asked me to go to Paldiski, because he wanted now people he now selected people he felt were good at their jobs. Of course, now everybody's good at their job. It's because of the selection, but that extra something and the linkage between minds, and we got on really well. And he asked me, "Would you stay behind?" Because a lot of guys actually want to go home because they had families, and I said, "Yes, boss." And of course, going to Paldiski followed that domino effect of why I'm here now. So it reinforced my belief that even if it's uncomfortable, even if you may get in trouble, because certainly you can have somebody maybe will take umbrage at what you said. If you believe you're right, speak the truth, even if it may be unpleasant to say it, and also for that person to listen. But that is the truth as I see it, and that is the situation. If you want to make a comeback to me, please do. But you asked me, and I've told you. And I've stuck to that my entire career. Have I upset a few people? Whoa, yes, I have.
But would you also say that you also understood that you can tell him that he is capable of taking it?
Okay, very good question. Very good question. Now, I know within the British Army, there's definitely some regiments that the first thing is the officer would never ask the senior NCO that question. They would never ask that question. And that's a slight failure as well, because you've got to be able to listen. You've got to be able to listen below and up. And sometimes I think it's very important that you keep connected. You have to understand what's going on below you. And they may know a lot more about the situation than you do. And that's why generals, normally, very senior generals, talk to the troops, and a good general will make sure that he talks to maybe one of the lowest ranks there privately to find out what the hell is going on. Because normally the lowest rank with nothing to lose will tell him straight.
Yeah.
Now, if you live in this rosy peacetime world, you can play the game we talked about see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I believe certainly within the Corps, we're brought up to speak our minds. Of course, there's a certain way of going about it. I was respectful to him. He asked me, and I just told him clearly and concisely what I thought and why I thought that. But on a human level, yes, it may upset somebody, but I'd like to think in a man's world that you are able to speak the truth and the person above is able to accept it. And I certainly felt a respect for that captain, because he took what I told him on the chin and walked away, and rather than seek you could say even a covert punishment, he gave me, well, a good report, which I did deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'd earned his, I found out later, obviously, I'd earned his respect. And we ended up with a very, very happy relationship working together on that team. So really, I would say to people, I would say to people, you know what? Don't be frightened. Speak the truth, because I believe the truth has its own protections. It has its own protections. I call it my shield. The truth is my shield. And that certainly helped me in Estonia. Absolutely. Because what I did notice amongst the foreigners, they would not speak the truth. They would speak what they felt the Estonian military wanted to hear.
Or it also could be that, like, there's another interesting kind of philosophy, or I don't know, a construct. When, for example, you take a troop who goes to Afghanistan, and what do they report in terms of if they need to train the local unit? They say that yes, they are now better. Now the next commander comes in, what do they say? They say yes, now they are a little bit more better. And if you do work there in 10 years, every commander will tell you that the troops got better and better and better and better and better, but in reality, they were not. So, and now if you say that, hey, we failed in training them, you will get like honesty somehow in there could be a thing which will not work for your advantage in raising in the ranks. So the reports eventually may end up being all the good, but in reality, you don't get the real picture anymore at all.
I would disagree, actually.
Okay.
I might be wrong. I'm going to try and express it.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, in fact, what you said, actually, I agree with that at one level. I agree with it at one level. Because I'm talking now about talking to the hierarchy, the army in charge. Because I would say, whilst you talk that way to the local tribesmen you're training,
mm-hmm.
if they've got a proper hierarchy and establishment, you have to inform them of their skill level. You don't take it out on the soldier because of the lack of inadequacies in previous training that is actually, compared to me, that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
You have to also empathise his situation, because therefore with what he's done, with what he's been given, although it to my standard and with what I've got that's poor or pathetic, that
mm-hmm.
from what he's got is very good. You see the difference between this?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to punish him with a critique that's beyond his control. But the hierarchy, if there is one, I've got to inform him that of what exactly they can do vis-a-vis us. Because I really understand that training foreign troops and different troops without a fundamental structure, you cannot destroy with criticism the people you're training. So whilst you may say they're good, but you know what, you are being honest, they're good compared to their situation. But you have to go back to your hierarchy and make sure, because and this is pertinent to Afghanistan, you have to make sure, because somebody bullshitted the American hierarchy sat on their asses in the Pentagon, that the Afghan army could fight and win against the Taliban, and they could not. And I believe there was a wafer between this and this, because if they say to up here that how bad they are, they might lose that, because this is going on. Generals in this superior leadership position in the Pentagon, don't tell me that truth. I don't want to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't tell me what I want to hear, you ain't going nowhere. So
that's what I was referring to.
So this is the full cycle,
yes.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the Taliban or the Afghan army, they're doing pretty well for a bunch of potheads.
Yeah.
For a bunch of potheads who actually can be bought off. Yeah, they're pretty good today, maybe. But are they going to beat the Taliban on their own? No. Do we have
That's
to
what
keep,
I was referring.
Do we have to keep them sweet today? Yeah, we do. So yeah, keeping them sweet for that end, I totally get that. But I also know that now in this case, our side has to know their capability. Now I also understand there's politics involved. So that's the. But we see it goes wrong when your leadership will not pass that information up the chain of command, lest they lose promotions, because they also know. So again, this is that circle we talked about, because the hierarchy also the supreme hierarchy don't want to know the truth. They want to know what they wish to be known, which is everything is sweet.
And that's how everything ends up in a disaster eventually.
A disaster. And I call that, you're happy, I'm happy, we're happy bullshit game. And that is disaster at every level. And when I come on to training, even at the lowest level here, what I noticed, and I wrote about this, it used to drive me crazy. You can give the world's worst lesson, and the instructor will be saying, "Hey, what do you think?" "Yes, Sergeant, that was good," because they want to go away. "Oh, I'm good." So-called supervisor who actually doesn't know what he's watching. "Oh, very good, very good, very good, man, very good." So he can walk away. "Yes, everything's good." Yeah? What did I see? I don't know. But it's good. So I can now say that I now know what I'm doing. And it's just, but those soldiers actually, or whoever's being taught, are not proficient. But they're not, the soldiers who you're training aren't interested, because they just want to go and have a cup of tea or a coffee or go for a beer, go home at the weekend and maybe just finish their conscript service, because that's their aim, to finish their service and go home. The NCO now feels good because he's been told, yeah, everything's good. And he's happy, you're happy, I'm happy, we're happy.
Yeah.
And of course, I come along and I say, that's terrible. And I'm the bad man. I'm the bad man. You know? And this was, when we come on to this is why in my early days here, it's a very painful emotional experience to have to be the only person to say, I'm sorry, that is going to get you killed. This has to change. This has to stop. And of course, because everybody's been saying how good they are for so long, including American Special Forces, because American Special Forces did exactly the same thing. And I actually had a good talk to them about it. I said, don't come here and tell them and blow smoke at their asses, because it's dangerous.
Absolutely.
You know,
because it's not true.
It's just everybody's being played. You know,
that's where the integrity of being an instructor comes in. You have to actually tell what you see.
Yeah, well, it's the integrity at every level. Everybody has to explain the truth. I do know there's different ways. Yet again, I say, you know, playing that musical instrument. There's different ways of going about this.
Yeah. You don't have to be a asshole and
no,
prick. That will not get anyone anywhere. No. And so it
goes back to, you know, there's a way, and this is what I'd like to think about myself. How I've learned. I learned how to go up and down this leadership ladder, or approach the situation. Okay, I knew that every time I had to do something, I would not know until I met the soldiers, looked them in the eye. I could measure a sort of feedback, sort of telepathic feedback. I could feel the mood, and I could then know at what level and how to get them to do what I wanted them to do, because they wanted to do it. And I think it was Eisenhower who said that about leadership. The best form of leadership is getting somebody to do something that you want them to do because they want to do it. And if that's possible, that's what I always try to do. Now, of course, sometimes if I know they've got to do this, if you don't want to do it, I'm sorry, you're going to do it. And it's painful for them. It's painful for me.
Mm-hmm.
But
So being true, there's also a good saying like being truthful doesn't give you the right to be an asshole.
no, you haven't got to be an arsehole. No.
But some people are like, okay, now I will bring you the truth hammer, and they just be an asshole.
Well, yeah, and of course, as I say, that's why with experience and maturity, you find a way to get it across without hopefully denting the ego. And I'll tell you straight, the Estonian guys have got an ego.
Absolutely.
They've got pride. They got ego. I understand that, So I started to, because did I make mistakes? Possibly at first. Yeah, absolutely. And I learned, and I corrected myself. And I do know occasionally I did upset people. And I thought I shouldn't have said that. Not because I was wrong, because I didn't take into consideration about I didn't empathise with what had happened before this. Now, when I was in the Royal Marines, you didn't have to play any game because you knew exactly what they had done, what they should be capable of doing, and if they can't do it, you're going to get the good news, which actually is the bad news. And then we're going to find a way to fix it. Now, this is like the ultimate situation. If something's really bad, you're going to, no, I'm not going to dress it up with niceties. You fucked up, excuse that word, and I'm going to fix it. Will it be painful? Yeah, not my problem. That's your problem, your mistake. Let's rock and roll. And there go. And they would be shamed because they now know they've not met the standard that they know they should be at. So the worst thing you can say to a guy is, so you're supposed to be a Royal Marine. Do you think that's the correct standard? Is it? No. Damn right it's not. Well, let's fix it. So I don't have to play that game. There's no playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, but I did find though that because of our discipline and training, I could actually talk to people just like we are now. Okay, fellas, that wasn't good enough. We're going to do it again. I go, yeah, but let's do it again. I prefer that.
I think it is just a lot of where, I don't know, we kind of come from, I guess. Could be one explanation of it, because of when in an era of Soviet era, like the people were eventually like what these kind of Soviet kind of regime wants. They want people to just follow the orders and not to think too much. Now, eventually, if you spend too much time in it, you eventually become so closed-minded. Then if now someone brings you, I don't know, the like democracy or whatever, the good thing, you can't just take it in because you are not prepared to take it in. So then you have to play the game to first even get the window slightly opened, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And you came from an environment where the window was open already. Which was awesome.
It'd be interesting to go into this in more depth actually when we come on to that time in my career when I actually changed uniforms. Looking back on it, I did personally learn a lot about myself.
That's awesome. So at the moment, I think we have about 10 minutes. So what do we want to? Where do we want to land in UK now? So you came back from Canada?
So I came out from Canada, and guess what? We're going to Norway. Yeah? So now we're going to Scotland again. In fact, we had this massive exercise. We now had a massive exercise in Cape Wrath. And Cape Wrath is the wettest place in UK. And the time of the exercise is the highest recorded rainfall in 100 years. There was also a lot of ships involved, and we were actually on board the ship and disembarking. We did it 3 times. So that we did one exercise, got back on board the ship, dropped off in Wales, did another exercise, and then got dropped off on Dartmoor. And that was 3 weeks, so that was a tough exercise. And I actually felt that they're trying to, you talked about lessons learned. I think with all this shipping and the scenario, because the scenario actually seemed very similar to the Falklands. So I think maybe they were trying to iron out at a very high level some of those problems. For me, I'm just getting really cold, really wet, and marching over mountains again, you know. But it's what I joined up for, and I feel proud to have been a grunt and not stuck in an office. So, hey, and at the end of it, you feel pride in doing that, you know, because this is, to me, is a soldier. And we then came back from that and got ready for Norway again. We did Norway again, repeat, reload, repeat, yeah. Then came back and went to Northern Ireland. Then came back and went to Norway. And suddenly I realised that I'm 27. And this is now 10 full years. 10 years. And it seemed like one long year. Now, I'm not complaining, but it's. I never used to think in terms of years. I thought in terms of deployments. Now, with this final, in my 7th Norway in my face, I have to admit, I had a slight emotional breakdown. Yeah, you know. Emotional breakdown, maybe too strong. No, I definitely had. So I definitely felt I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this.
Your bucket got full.
It did get full. I came to that breaking point, and this is probably a good way to finish. Actually, I now decide. Okay, I don't want to be anything except a rifle company guy. Now, we came under the term GD, General Duties. But there are other jobs that you can be employed in, General Duties. And they're going to be HQ jobs. Now, you know my attitude towards HQ. And I was also under the naive misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You can brainwash yourself. Oh, I'm never going to be HQ. Well, you don't decide. But those angels again, you know, good one, bad one. You need a break. You need a break. Take an easy job. No, that's not you. That's not you. If you don't do something, you're going to get that shitty job you don't want. Okay, what do I do? Well, we do have specialisations within the Royal Marines, and there's GD specialisations, and there's what we call technical specifications, specialisations. And you know what? You could become a cook, a clerk, a driver, a signaller, and of course there's GD ones like heavy weapons, mortars. So what a lot of guys, well, especially a lot of guys who wanted to stay Marines, they actually went to support company, became mortarmen, you know. I didn't want that, especially as a leader. I didn't want that. Although it was a good company because they were older Marines, you know. Salty Marines, they say. There were 3 things I was prepared to do. Was mountain leader, because I was very fit and I'm very experienced in Norway. PTI, or platoon weapon instructor. PTI, sorry, physical training instructor.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
And platoon weapon instructor. Although I'll explain more about that specification in detail, because someone said to me recently, oh, when you told me that this was your previous qualification, I thought it was you just taught weapons. No, it's just the title, yeah. And it also has a sort of historical comes from a historical sort of
Mm-hmm.
terminology of that position from some time ago, such as the cross rifles. You know, we get the cross rifle badge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd missed the there was a course you had to do. There was a selection course for the ML course, and there was one a year, and I just missed it. The troop sergeant was an ML, and he said, he recommended me. He said, go on, do an MLs. I said, okay, he said, the next one's next year. I couldn't know. I can't know. It's too late. PTI. I was going to go. I thought about becoming a PTI. And my mentor, Mick Eccles, military medal, which is a big medal. His medal sold for £100,000. Unfortunately, he died 2 years ago. Mick had been my mentor since I was a young Marine, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, "You don't want to become a PTI." He said, "You won't enjoy the atmosphere." He said, "It's not you." He said, "Become a PW." Now Mick was a PW, and I thought, you know what? I would have never entertained that thought, because when you're trained by PWs as a recruit, and I hated them. Although I hated one person, who was my instructor. He was a bad PW, and I'll talk about this probably later.
Mm-hmm.
But then I put that to one side and thought, you know what? Because PWs are really respected in the Corps. You know, they're really respected, even if guys won't admit it, because they make Marines, for want of a better word. And I thought, well, you know what? If I leave the rifle company, I'm gonna now teach what I do in the rifle company. If I do a PW's course, so I'm really doing the same sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I realised I needed a break. And if you become an instructor, you then are going to be. We call it the factory. You're going to go to the factory, which is the Commando Training Centre. We refer to it as the factory, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good term, because we say it's also like a sausage machine. You put the meat at the start, and it comes out a sausage. You put a civilian at the start, it comes out a Royal Marine. And we also train officers at the same place. You put a guy from university in there, he comes out a lieutenant. We train we train most of our specialisations there, which is very, very homogenous, very good. You also get to see everybody training together to the same the same standards, you know, and that actually creates mutual respect, which is very important for unit cohesion. So I thought, okay, so I put in for this course. I have to admit, I was a little bit worried, not worried, but I knew it was going to be a hard course. But, you know, every course actually is hard in some way. It was going to be a hard course because it was actually connected to the leadership course you do, which is hard. And in fact, on some of the subjects you learn on the leadership course, you've now got to be tested now to a higher standard and more. So I knew I had 3 months of real hard work. Yeah, I don't mind admitting that. Yeah, I knew that. And also at the factory, which the factory, keep me away from the factory, you know. But I put in for that course, and yet again, that's why I'm sat here now. And I have to admit that it suited me completely. It suited me completely. Thank you, Mick. You were right. It was me, and it changed the course of my life. So I went to our Commando Training Centre, and because you're on a course, it is strict, which I agree with, because it keeps you on your toes. There's a lot to learn, and I think in military terms, what they do is you've got every day is 3 days in civilian street. They haven't got time to keep you there for 9 months. So you get a lot of work. and a lot of homework. You are working from 8 in the morning right up until midnight because you can work longer because you've got homework to do. You've got lessons to prepare, and they've got to be to a high standard.
Yeah.
So I did that course, and I've got to explain about that course in more detail and why and what we learn on that course. What we learn on that course, why we learn that on that course, and why it's at that standard.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've got time now to do that.
It's a perfect place to start from the next time.
So next time we start, I will talk about that course, and there's many things that I learnt on it, which as especially in this environment, I now totally understood why we do that. And many other things associated with it. There's a real method to this madness. There's a real method to it. And if you haven't got it, you can't build that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So it really made me understand the importance of that course and why we had that branch within the Royal Marines, such as there's the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And when you haven't got it, you can have mayhem. You can have military mayhem with everybody doing their own thing to their standard, using their own materials or their own interpretation of what their material is. And that then leads to a situation where you can't supervise that because you can't measure it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the person going to look at it doesn't quite know what it is. Let's leave it there because that's a big rabbit hole I can go down.
Sounds good.
But it did make me appreciate my previous life. But that's no criticism of the Australian Army. It just made me appreciate that how lucky how we developed over 300 years more. We didn't just suddenly, be this way. It took us a long time to get there. So there's no criticism. It's just I now understood what has to be done with, I say, the vision. I had a vision for the future, and when I put on this uniform here. So
yeah, for whatever reason, the understanding the why in every aspect of life is a very powerful thing that needs to be asked all the time. Why this? Why? That's one word which you have to understand, and that will open up another perspective to things and why we do things. Especially
when something is difficult, if you understand why you have to do it, you can accept it.
Yeah.
If you have to beat yourself up and you don't understand why, there's no motivation. Why am I getting beaten up? What's the point? So
agree.
Every time you learn something or teach something or lead something, why am I doing this? And let's just go back to, I finished on that fighting patrol.
Mm-hmm.
I was prepared to die on that fighting patrol because I understood why it might have to happen, because the CO has to have this information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not pleased about it.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm not being sacrificed because the CO's an imbecile.
Yeah.
He's doing this for a reason, and he had to also suck it up and maybe lose some men, because I need that information to ensure that the whole battalion does not suffer on the attack. So when you make decisions as a leader, it may have to be a very uncomfortable decision, but that's something that's on the leader's shoulders.
I agree. Awesome talk today. So let's leave it at here and see you next time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Remo. Thank you very much. And until the next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you then. Bye.